Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, and we are doing breaches of the week as always. This week in data breaches, absolutely insane, including some real interesting ones in the political sphere, and you know my preamble on that. But before we begin, I want to thank the following people that sent me a lot of this information. That would be Joe DiBiase, Jacqueline Wolf, Marcus Ham, John Furdy, and Faisal Awad. Thank you very much. Please keep sending those tips my way. And with that, let's dive in and start in the United Kingdom with their prisons, because the Ministry of Justice has said that they are aware of a data breach affecting prisons in both England and Wales. Now, confidential prison layouts have been leaked onto the dark web in the past couple of weeks, according to the Times. A former prison governor, told the paper organized crime groups could potentially use the information to smuggle drugs or weapons into the prison or even plan escapes. So obviously not a good thing either way you cut it. Now, the MOJ said that they have, quote, taken immediate action to ensure prisons remain secure. The Times also reported that prison authorities suspect the leak may be linked to organized crime groups aiming to use drones to smuggle drugs into prisons, while blueprints could be used to evade security measures. The leaked blueprints are reported to include the locations of key security features, such as cameras and sensors, obviously making it much easier for criminals to bypass security or exploit vulnerabilities. It's not clear which prisons were affected because they're not saying which prisons were. And obviously that's a real interesting thing, but to that point, yeah, I mean, prison, and apparently in the UK, it's no different than here in the United States, where there is a drug problem with smuggling, buying, selling, all that kind of stuff. Not to mention the fact, if I know where all the cameras and the sensors are, I might be sitting in Bermuda in 2 days if I can get out of the prison, right? So there you go. It's, I think, a huge issue. And with that, let's move on, but keep it in the UK with Finastra. Now, they are a global leader in financial technology, and they actually serve 45 of the world's top 50 banks. So this is a major player you may not have heard of. They just confirmed a major data breach impacting their internal file transfer system. Now, they're based out of London, and they facilitate vital banking and wire transfers for over 8,100 financial institutions, and they detected a breach on November 7. Now, the breach targeted Finastra's internally hosted SFTP, that secure file transfer platform, which was exploited using stolen credentials, basically a username and password, got the attackers right in. Not a good look for financial institutions. The attackers claim to have leveraged IBM Aspera, that's a high-speed file transfer tool, to exfiltrate data from the system. And so the cyber criminal known as Abyss, that's Abyss Zero actually, first advertised stolen data on breach forums on October 31. The initial price was $20,000 US, and it was later cut in half to $10,000 US. And after gaining basically attention, Abyss Zero disappeared and erased their presence from breach forums and Telegram as well. And here we are. So we're going to see what's going on with this, but heads up, your bank may use Finastra, and here we go. Moving on, let's do our mini segment simply entitled, if you just paid for cybersecurity, you wouldn't be getting your reputation ruined and you wouldn't be getting sued. And let's start out huge with Facebook. Yes, one of the worst companies in the world, run by one of the worst people. Now, the Supreme Court this past Friday here in the United States dismissed Facebook's appeal of a lower court order reviving a shareholder lawsuit brought against the social media giant in light of the Cambridge Analytica disaster back in 2015 that came to light a couple years after that, and they misused millions of Facebook users' data. In its first opinion on the term, the High Court issued a one-line unsigned decision dismissing Facebook's appeal. So obviously I'm a big fan of that. They need to be held accountable. The court's ruling indicates that it believes it should not have taken up the case, though the Supreme Court did not obviously explain its reasoning. And in tossing out the appeal, the Supreme Court leaves in place the decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit in favor of Facebook shareholders, meaning Facebook basically is getting taken to task. They had filed a securities fraud lawsuit against Facebook for allegedly misleading them in financial filings about the risks stemming from the massive data breach by Cambridge Analytica. And quite frankly, I hope they win $1 trillion and put that blasted company out of business once and for all. Moving on. Lazarus Naturals. This is a CBD oil seller, and they are now going to pay $300,000 to settle a class action alleging that they negligently failed to protect the personal information of more than 42,000 people that was exposed in a 2023 data breach. Now, each member of the settlement class will be entitled of a payment up to $5,000 in reimbursement for documented out-of-pocket losses, or a pro rata cash payment for the net settlement fund, according to the plaintiff's motion of final approval. Judge Jolie A. Russo of the U.S. District Court for the District of Oregon granted the motion on Thursday. And so heads up to you, if you bought any CBD anything from Lazarus Naturals, you may be entitled to like $15, maybe up to $5,000 if you really got screwed. Moving on. Let's talk about TracFone. Now, TracFone, I believe, is like those burner phones you can buy at like a 7-Eleven. Essentially, they got hit with a class action lawsuit after a major data breach led to widespread identity theft and fraud for its customers. Now, there were multiple plaintiffs here. Darren Barcombe, David Setters, Sharice Carson, Janae Cole, Joshua Davis, Raven Harden, and Michael Broadus filed a class action against TracFone Wireless Inc. on November 15th in New York federal court, alleging negligence and violation of both state and federal laws. According to the lawsuit, the mobile provider failed to secure their personal and financial data, which led to a host of negative outcomes. The plaintiffs claim TracFone's negligence allowed attackers to access confidential information and exploit it for a port-out fraud, meaning essentially you can steal the number, steal the identity, and then basically move that and transfer that to another phone outside of the user's control. The TracFone data breach class action alleges that the attackers stole this information, such as personally identifiable information, and also customer proprietary network information, or CPNI, to transfer victims' mobile numbers to another provider without their consent. So heads up to you, if you got a TracFone and you were caught up with this, you may eventually be entitled to compensation. Moving on, Gandhara Mental Health. Now, a woman has filed a class action lawsuit against basically this mental health care provider following a breach estimated to impact more than 20,000 current and former clients. The breach occurred on June 20th, and that is according to the lawsuit filed in Hamden Superior Court by Wanda Del Rio of Springfield against Gandhara Medical Health. The lawsuit also alleges that the thieves hijacked sensitive personal information. We're talking names, address, driver's license, social security, dates of birth, medical treatment, and health insurance information. So if you have anything to do with Gandhara Mental Health Center, I guess in and around Springfield, Ohio, or Illinois, not sure which Springfield, maybe Massachusetts, not sure. Either way, if that name rings a bell, go check it out. You're probably going to get paid sooner than later. And so those were your lawsuits of the week. Class actions of the week. If they had just paid for cybersecurity, they wouldn't be getting sued, and hopefully Facebook's going out of business as a result. I highly doubt it. Moving on, let's talk about the Ford Motor Company. Yes, one of the major providers of cars in the world. And this is actually an interesting one because a reported potential Ford customer data breach turned out not to be a threat after an investigation found there was no leak. So if you heard about this one, apparently Ford is claiming we're good. Now, after attackers, Intel broker and energy weapon user claimed in a post on Breach Forum about a week ago or so that they obtained 44,000 customer records, Ford launched an investigation. Ford that said this past Wednesday that its investigation determined that there was no breach of Ford systems or customer data. Instead, and I quote, the matter involved a third-party supplier and a small batch of publicly available dealers' businesses' addresses. That's according to Ford spokesperson Richard Binhammer in an email. Binhammer also said that Ford's understanding is that the matter has now been resolved. So heads up to you. If you drive a Ford, own a Ford, whatever, or you just heard about the Ford data breach, apparently it wasn't. Moving on, Softway Medical Group. They have developed basically something called MediBoard, obviously healthcare. They just confirmed that an attacker did succeed in compromising a MediBoard account, but declared that the security breach was not the result of a misconfiguration of software or a software flaw, but instead through the theft of login credentials used by an unnamed hospital. In a letter shared with French journalists, that's right, we're in France for this one, Softway Medical Group said the attack was detected within a French healthcare facility using MediBoard on November 19 of this year, and they emphasized that stolen data was not hosted by Softway either. So heads up to you. I don't know which French hospital. I actually remember looking for this one about a day ago or so, and I could not find the hospital, so they're not saying, but heads up to you. if you have a French hospital, you use a French hospital that uses Mediboard from Softway. Moving on, Members Trust Company on November 19th, they filed with Maine after discovering an unauthorized party was able to access an employee's email account. Now, we were talking about the normal kinds of disclosures for sensitive information: names, dates of birth, driver's license, state IDs, financial account numbers, social security numbers, credit card and debit card numbers, passports, medical information, etc., etc. So, by virtue of that, Members Trust Company is sending out notices as well. Moving on, let's go to Rockford Gastroenterology Associates. Basically, the people that do the stomachs in Rockford, Illinois, which actually isn't too far from here, given that they are in the Chicagoland area, just west of Chicago. Now, on October 30, Rockford Gastroenterology, I cannot say that word today, Rockford, the gastro people, filed a notice of data breach with Health and Human Services, Office of Civil Rights, after they were targeted by a cyber attack. Now, Rockford Associates explained that the incident resulted in an unauthorized party being able to access patients' sensitive information, which included personal and health information. I do not have a listing. They are sending out notifications, and apparently 147,253 were affected in this breach that occurred in 2023. So, way late to the game there, gastroenterology of Rockford, or Rockford Gastroenterology. It took me a minute there. Moving on. Humboldt Independent Practice Association on November 11th, they filed with Health and Human Services as an unauthorized party access information from them as well. I do not have a listing on that, but sensitive information, including PHI, may have been hit, and Humboldt is also sending out info as well. Next up, I want to give you an update that I talked about the other week on Stop & Shop. Now, Stop & Shop has announced that they have largely recovered from their data breach that affected stores throughout the New England area here in the United States. Quote, Stop & Shop stores are stocked and largely recovered, according to their announcement. And I continue, we recognize the high trust our customers place in us to nourish their families and our communities, and we deeply appreciate their patience as we work to restock shelves. So heads up to you, if you're a Stop & Shop shopper, you're back online. Moving on. IT provider VTech Solution. When I first read this, I thought it was like the VTech, like the old phones when we all used to have phones that plugged into walls, you know, the copper lines. I remember having a wireless phone from VTech, but apparently this is an IT provider. Sounds like that. Now, they filed with Massachusetts after discovering information, basically that they had information that was subject to unauthorized access. They said that the incident resulted in consumer-sensitive information being hit, including names and social security numbers, and VTech, the IT provider, is sending out notifications as well. Moving on. MD Land International. On November 7th, they filed with Health and Human Services, Office of Civil Rights, after an unauthorized party accessed portions of their infrastructure. They said sensitive consumer information basically was accessed as well. I do not have a list, but MD Land is sending out notices as well. Moving on. iLearning Engines on November 18th, they filed with the Security and Exchange Commission, or SEC, after discovering an unauthorized party was able to access their infrastructure as well. iLearning Engines explained that the attackers accessed certain files on the computer network, intercepted a wire transfer for $250,000, and also deleted certain emails, most likely to cover their tracks, according to the SEC filing. iLearning Engines is in the process of investigation, and so obviously they'll be sending out notices as soon as they have a full understanding of what is going on, but heads up to you, iLearning Engine patrons. Moving on, let's talk about the U.S. space tech giant Maxar. Attackers breached the satellite maker and accessed personal data belonging to its employees. The company has basically started to inform impacted individuals. Now, the threat actor compromised the company network about a week before the discovery of the intrusion, and I quote, "Our information security team discovered that an attacker using a Hong Kong-based IP address targeted and accessed a Maxar system containing certain files with employee personal data." That's according to their official notification. Now, the Colorado-based company has built more than 80 satellites that are currently in orbit, and basically its technology has contributed to space exploration. The Maxar 1300 platform, for example, plays a key part in the success of NASA's Psyche mission, and its power and propulsion elements were used for the Artemis moon exploration program as well. Maxar Space Systems said the attacker likely had access to the following information. That would be name, home address, social security, business contact info, gender, employment status, employee number, job title, hire/termination and role start date, supervisor, and department. Obviously, they are sending out notices as needed, but they've also clarified to say that no bank account information was actually accessed. So if you work there or have anything to do with them, your funds are okay. Everything else isn't. Moving on. I want to give you an update from the Infosys McCamish 2023 breach. This was a supply chain breach, and we have a whole bunch of companies that have been basically declaring off and on for like the last year or so. And you know, I keep you up to date on these things. So this week, it's Farmers Insurance. So if you have a Farmers Insurance claim or policy, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about Acadian Ambulance out of the state of Texas. Now, they have been notifying customers basically this month in November of a June 2024 data breach. The company noticed suspicious activity on their network on June 21 and began to investigate according to their statement. We're talking names, address, dates of birth, medical information collected during the patient intake process, which could include diagnosis, disability information, medications, and treatment information as well. So if you've ever been picked up by an Acadian ambulance deep in the heart of Texas, you might want to check in. Moving on. Let's talk about MicroLise. That's Micro L-I-S-E. They're based out of the UK, and they are a telematics business. They confirmed on Monday that attackers compromised corporate data from their headquarters during a cyber attack about 3-4 weeks ago. Now, the attack on MicroLise has hard knock effects on the customers, including leaving British prison vans without functioning tracking systems or panic alarms. I'm wondering if that has anything to do with the UK's prison system getting their blueprints hit. Now, in a statement to the London Stock Exchange, MicroLise said, quote, "The vast majority of customer systems are back online, with some remaining customers conducting their own security verifications before enabling users." Now, the company stressed that, quote, "no customer systems data was compromised, although it has, quote, notified international authorities regarding the exfiltration of corporate data from its HQ and continues to work with law enforcement regarding this incident," end quote. So we're going to see what happens, but I'm wondering if that is part of the initial prison hit that I talked about right out of the gate here on Breaches of the Week. Moving on, let's head on back to the United States and go to Hannaford Supermarkets, apparently in and around the state of Maine. Their website is back online after more than a week of being down, but there's still a lot of questions as to whether the cyber attack, whether there was an actual hack and whether customer information was compromised. The store first reported a quote-unquote network issue on November 7, and pharmacies seem to be the first departments to show signs of trouble. Many customers were unable to fill prescriptions as a result of this disruption. Quote, "They couldn't fill it because they didn't have internet to look up the prescription." That's according to one customer in Bangor, Maine. Now, by the next day, Hannaford had announced that most of their pharmacies were operational again, but its website and the Hannaford To Go online ordering system remained down. Hannaford did not provide specific details about the issue or the statuses of customer data security. Hannaford's parent company, Ahold Delhaize, confirmed that the disruption stemmed from a cybersecurity issue impacting its U.S. network, but declined to elaborate further. So, heads up to you if you use or patron Hannaford Supermarkets in and around Maine. Hopefully your data is safe. And finally, and we've got two finalies for you, and both of them I think are interesting in their own right, but I want to start with Russian state hackers first. Now, you've heard me probably talk about them before, whether it's in Breaches of the Week or my other podcast, but I've talked about APT28, Advanced Persistent Threat 28. Now, they're also known as Fancy Bear, Forest Blizzard, and Sophacy as well. Now, they're pioneering a wireless attack that is now known as a nearest neighbor attack. Now, that allows them to compromise wireless infrastructure of a target from virtually anywhere in the world. Now, here's essentially how they're doing this. Here's how this works. So the very first step in this attack is Fancy Bear, has to identify another organization that is basically in the same building as the target or nearby. So let's say I'm here in my building with my wireless, and my business neighbor next door, et cetera, also has wireless. They are now looking not at me, they are looking at my neighbor. as a result of that. And so by virtue of that, my neighbor then gets compromised. And so once they're in my neighbor's infrastructure, they then leverage my neighbor's wireless to basically find my wireless and then hit the intended target, ideally compromising my wireless, gaining access into the system. That is much harder to detect, especially if you don't have network monitoring or security monitoring on your wireless, to have that essentially compromised and then rogue devices get attached to that, because it's not like somebody clicked a link or downloaded phishing. It's my neighbor that got compromised to compromise me. Now, the interesting part of that is that this was initially discovered on February 1st of 2022. So like 2.5 years ago, when a cybersecurity company, Volexity, detected a server compromise at a customer site in Washington, D.C. that was doing Ukraine-related work. And so by virtue of that, the Russians are leveraging your neighbors. So let's say your business is solely in a high-rise building and you're a tenant in this building and you've got a suite and a whole bunch of other people have a suite. If you're getting targeted in some way, shape, or form, it'd be very easy for me to Google who else is in that building. Odds are I can find it on Google Maps, compromise one of them to compromise you. That is an evolution in wireless attacks, because I don't have to have physical access or proximity to the wireless when I can simply be sitting thousands of miles away and hit you. Pretty dang cool, but pretty dang nefarious. And the finally is I want to talk about a man named Andrew Tate. Now, he is a far-right influencer who seems like a thoroughly terrible human being. And just after reading about him, I don't know much about him. I've heard the name before, but I really don't. So with that, I want to start with his bio, so you know who we're talking about, because I want to be very transparent about this stuff as well. And if you stop listening after this bio and don't hear the rest of this, you're going to think probably something I'm not trying to say. Now, with that, Andrew Tate is a 37-year-old former reality TV star and kickboxer. He is best known as a leading figure in something that is known as the Manosphere. Now, the Manosphere is described as a series of websites, blogs, and forums that primarily promote masculinity. Critics argue that a significant portion of this is toxic in nature. Now, Tate has previously described himself as a misogynist, that's great, and is known for his disparaging views towards women. A dual US-UK national, Tate is currently awaiting trial on human trafficking charges of basically trafficking women in the country of Romania. Now, in total, Tate is currently facing 5 legal investigations stemming from Romania and the United Kingdom. Other allegations include those involving basically the rape and sex trafficking of minors, as well as forming an organized crime group to sexually exploit women. Tate has denied these charges. So like I said, really nice guy, and here we go. So I'm going to explain in a moment here why he is actually my finally for this. Now, apparently an online course basically founded by Tate has recently been breached by attackers, revealing the email addresses of roughly 325,000 users. Now, the self-described online university known as The Real World offers users a, quote, advanced training and mentoring, end quote, for about $50 a month. Now, formerly known as Hustlers University, I'm assuming no relation to the publication, the platform focuses on topics such as health, fitness, financial investment, and e-commerce business as well. Quote, money making is a skill. We will teach you how to master it. That's according to the website. Now, this past Thursday, attackers made their actions known by flooding the course's primary chat room with emojis they uploaded while Tate was streaming an episode of his show entitled Emergency Meeting on the streaming platform Rumble. Now, the emojis included a transgender flag. Obviously, that would fly in the face of what Tate believes, as far as I know. A feminist fist, an AI-generated image of Tate draped in a rainbow flag. Again, something he probably is not a fan of. And another where his buttocks are enlarged, and a cat character used in the boy kisser meme is apparently present as well. I don't know what that meme is, for the record, so I don't know what that is. So with that, publications were provided with approximately 794,000 usernames for what are believed to be the site's current and former members, as well as contents of the private platform's 221 public and 395 private chat servers. A list of 324,384 unique emails that appear to belong to users who were removed for failure to pay were also handed over as well. Now, in a statement on the breach, the attackers claim that after accessing the data, they were able to leverage a vulnerability to, quote, upload emojis, delete attachments, crash everyone's clients, and temporarily ban people from the platform. Now, the Real World, for the record, claims that they currently have over 113,000 active users, which basically puts them at over 5.6 million, essentially in money generation every month. Now, a source with knowledge was telling publications that hacktivism was cited as the motive, and that the platform's security was described as "quote unquote" hilariously insecure. Now, an analysis of the chat logs by these publications show everything from inspirational quotes and progress updates to complaints over the quote-unquote LGBTQ agenda. Now, this is why he's my finally. And this isn't about the data breach itself. It's actually about privacy. Now, if you're a longtime listener and follower of mine, you know that I am not a fan of polarizing rhetoric. I like to say that cybersecurity is agnostic to politics, but we're not immune from it. But everyone, and I mean everyone, including Andrew Tate, who I think is a pretty terrible human being, and his followers, who I hope are less terrible, but could be terrible, I don't know. Everybody deserves privacy, including Andrew Tate as well. So unless they're planning actual crimes on the site, in which case, judges can get warrants where they can see, oh yes, he is planning human trafficking, something he's being charged with right now. Unless they're doing that, if they're just having conversations, no matter how bad, crazy, whatever the rhetoric is, they should be free to spout off whatever it is they want to each other. And I think that is completely sacrosanct. I'm not a big fan of the neo-Nazis either, but I know they've got chat forums. And again, as long as they're not planning crimes or anything malicious, they can rant on about whatever stupid thing they want to rant on about. And that's the problem that I think we have, is that in a polarized world, we essentially look at one side or the other, and Andrew Tate is not on my side, in terms of just human and civil rights from everything that I've read. Again, I don't know the guy, I don't follow his work, but we have this quick rush to judgment to say, well, no, you shouldn't have privacy, you should be stripped of rights, et cetera, et cetera. And the answer to that is no, rights are for everybody, and unless you violate those rights by violating others and committing crime, those rights are there for you. In the same way that I advocate that we should have total privacy online. We should not be weakening encryption for government's, use for law enforcement to make it easier. They should have to get warrants. They should have to go through a judicial process, an overview process, in order to access something if I've been accused of something, or if anybody has been accused of something. That is their job. Understand the government's job is not just to let's say, administer the laws of the land. It's to ensure that what we have as rights are actually ensured. We have a constitution here in the United States. Other governments and countries have constitutions as well. If we start violating those constitutions in the name of security, in the name of protecting one group over another, I think what we are doing is an overarching disservice. Nobody should be able to ignore the Constitution, suspend the Constitution, shred the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. And Andrew Tate, as pretty awful as he seems like he is as a human being, he has every right to privacy until he actually commits crimes. And so by virtue of that, here we are. So I say all of that to say, I would give this exact same video if there was a person on the far left. Whatever that is. The point is, we all deserve it, and here we are. I'm probably going to get flack for that, but oftentimes those people are the ones that, will suspend the Constitution for safety. So here we are. I'll leave it at that. Again, not getting political, but quite frankly, privacy is, I think, a fundamental human right, and everybody deserves it, no matter how good, bad, or ugly they are. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, just please, attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.